My dear friends, life has a mysterious rhythm, a rhythm that speaks not through noise, but through silence, not through logic, but through feelings. And when a woman is on the edge of transformation, before her life changes forever, something deep begins to move inside her. It's not the world outside that gives her the signs, it's her own soul whispering to her. So today, let's talk about these 6 spiritual shifts that every woman feels before her life takes a beautiful turn. If you've ever felt lost, emotional, detached, or strangely at peace, my dear sisters, maybe, just maybe, your transformation has already begun. Absolutely, here's us deep, inspiring, and emotionally engaging 800-word expansion of their Shift 1 to the Shift of Silence, written in a as Gaur Gopal Das style, filled with as life reflections, relatable examples, gentle humor, and spiritual wisdom that people will feel in their hearts. There comes a point in every woman's life when the noise around her no longer feels necessary. The endless chatter of opinions, judgments, expectations, it starts to fade away like an echo she no longer wants to chase. She begins to crave silence, not because she has nothing to say, but because she finally realizes that peace is louder than words. In her earlier years, she might have spent hours trying to explain herself to people, trying to prove that she was right, that her heart was pure, that her intentions were good. She thought if she could just express it clearly enough, people would understand. But life has a gentle way of teaching her that no matter how beautifully you speak, some people will only hear what fits their story. So one day she chooses silence, not out of weakness, but out of strength. She realizes that silence is not the absence of communication, it's the presence of understanding. It's the moment when you stop trying to convince others and start connecting with yourself. Let me give you a simple example from daily life. Imagine a woman in her home. She has argued many times with her family or friends about her dreams. They told her, "Why do you need to work so hard?" Or, "It's too late to start something new." She used to argue back, "Because it makes me happy, because I believe in myself." But over time, she notices something. Her words never change their minds. They keep saying the same things. So one morning, she just smiles, says nothing, and begins working quietly toward her dream. Months later, the same people who doubted her see the results of her dedication. Her silence spoke louder than her explanations ever could. That's the power of the shift. When a woman begins to embrace silence, she learns to listen, not just to others, but to the whispers of her own heart. Silence becomes her sanctuary, a sacred space where she meets her higher self. In that space, she learns what truly matters and what doesn't. Think about it. In this world of constant noise, where everyone is talking but few are listening, silence becomes an act of rebellion and wisdom. It's a statement that says, "I no longer need to compete for attention. I choose peace over approval." There's a story I once heard. A teacher asked her student, "When do you know that you are growing spiritually?" The student said, "When I start speaking less." The teacher smiled and said, "No, when your silence begins to speak for you." That's exactly what happens during this shift. A woman's silence begins to carry her energy. People around her start to feel her calmness, her confidence, her grace. She doesn't need to shout to be noticed anymore. Her presence itself becomes powerful. Silence also teaches her emotional maturity. Earlier, small things would disturb her: someone's harsh words, a friend's betrayal, an unfair judgment. But now she pauses. She takes a deep breath and reminds herself, not everything deserves a reaction. She starts to choose her peace over her pride. And this doesn't mean she suppresses her feelings. No. It means she understands that peace is more precious than being right. In relationships too, this shift becomes visible. Before, she might have tried to fix everyone, to please people, to solve their problems, to explain her pain. But now, she lets life take its own rhythm. She doesn't chase people anymore. She gives space because she's learned that what's meant for her will never require her to lose herself. When she walks into silence, she also walks into clarity. She starts understanding her emotions better. She sees who truly cares and who was only attracted to her energy when it was convenient. Silence reveals truth. And here's something beautiful. Silence doesn't mean loneliness. In fact, it attracts the right kind of people. When she becomes peaceful, she starts drawing souls who understand her calmness, not those who feed on her chaos. In this phase, you'll often find her spending more time with nature, sitting quietly near a window with a cup of tea, or walking in the evening breeze. She begins to feel connected, not just to people, but to life itself. She starts noticing things she once ignored: the sound of birds, the fragrance of flowers, the play of sunlight. Silence becomes her teacher, and life becomes her classroom. There's a divine elegance in this shift. The woman who once felt unheard now doesn't need to be heard, because she feels complete. The woman who once sought validation now validates herself. The woman who once feared being alone now realizes that solitude is not a punishment, it's a privilege. Sometimes, silence is where she meets God. When words fade, prayers begin. In that sacred stillness, she finds her answers. So if you ever notice yourself or another woman becoming quieter, don't misunderstand it as sadness. Maybe she's not withdrawing, maybe she's evolving, maybe she's preparing for the next version of her life, one that will require calmness, not chaos, because silence is not the end of her voice, it's the beginning of her wisdom. In silence, she learns that peace is not found in perfect situations, but in a balanced heart. She learns that growth doesn't always make noise. Flowers bloom quietly, and so do souls. So, when you see a woman sitting silently, smiling softly, and letting go of unnecessary battles, understand that something powerful is happening within her. Her silence is not emptiness, it's transformation in progress. There comes a sacred moment in a woman's journey when she finally understands that holding on doesn't always mean strength, and letting go doesn't always mean loss. It's the moment when she realizes that peace is often found not in getting what she wants, but in releasing what no longer serves her soul. At first, this shift doesn't feel like wisdom. It feels like pain. Letting go often begins with tears, the kind that fall quietly when no one is watching. It starts when she finally admits to herself, I cannot carry this anymore. Maybe it's a relationship she tried to save 1,000 times. Maybe it's a dream that didn't bloom. Or maybe it's simply the idea of how life should have been. But as she releases, something magical happens. The weight on her chest begins to lift. The world doesn't change immediately, but she does. She starts to breathe differently. Her shoulders soften, her mind clears, and her heart, once heavy with memories, begins to feel light again. Letting go is not forgetting. It's remembering without pain. It's the art of accepting that not everything meant something forever. And that's okay. Let's take a simple daily example. Imagine a woman who loved deeply. She gave everything, her time, her energy, her prayers, to someone who couldn't see her worth. Every day she hoped things would change. She told herself, if I love more, maybe they'll love me back. But one day, while sitting alone at night, she realized something profound. She had been watering a plant that had already stopped growing. That's when she stopped begging for closure and started creating her own peace. She whispered, I release you, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. That was the day her healing began. Letting go doesn't mean she stopped caring. It means she started caring for herself. It means she stopped chasing doors that had already closed and started trusting that the right ones would open in divine timing. There's beauty in surrender, a kind of strength that doesn't shout but quietly endures. You see, the hardest part is not letting go of others. It's letting go of the version of ourselves that believed we couldn't survive without them. Many women hold on to situations, friendships, and memories because they fear emptiness. But here's the truth. Emptiness is not the absence of life. It's the space where new life can begin. When a woman finally releases what weighs her down, the universe begins to fill her with what lifts her up. Think about how nature works. In autumn, trees shed their leaves. If the tree tried to hold on to every old leaf, it would never make space for spring. Similarly, when a woman lets go, she's not losing. She's making space for renewal. I once met a woman who had been in the same job for years. She was good at it, but miserable. Every day she told herself, at least it's stable. But her heart longed for something more meaningful. One morning, after months of hesitation, she decided to resign. She cried, not because she failed, but because she was scared. Yet within months, she started her own small business, doing what she loved. Later she said, the day I let go of what I didn't love, life finally gave me what I did. That is the miracle of letting go. It clears the path for miracles to enter. When a woman reaches this shift, she begins to understand that not everything broken needs to be fixed. Some things are meant to be lessons, not lifelong companions. She stops running after explanations and starts walking in acceptance. She begins to say, I don't understand why this happened, but I trust that it was for my growth. Her energy changes. Her conversations change. She becomes calmer. You'll notice it. She doesn't react to everything anymore. She doesn't fight every battle. She chooses peace over proving points. That's when people start to see her as changed. But the truth is, she's not changed. She's healed. And healing always begins with release. Letting go also means forgiving, not necessarily for others, but for herself. Because holding on to anger or resentment is like carrying fire in your hands and expecting others to burn. When she forgives, she sets herself free. Her heart becomes light again. Her smile becomes genuine again. She no longer looks back with pain, but with gratitude for what the experience taught her. Sometimes, letting go is as simple as changing a thought, releasing the need to control, the need to be perfect, the need to be understood. It's whispering to yourself, I am enough, even if I walk away. There's a quiet dignity in that moment. The woman who once begged for answers now walks away with grace. The woman who once feared being alone now finds comfort in solitude. The woman who once carried everyone's burdens now protects her peace like a sacred flame. And when she lets go fully, something incredible happens. She becomes magnetic. Peaceful people always are. New opportunities, healthier relationships, unexpected blessings begin to flow her way because the universe fills the space created by surrender with something greater than she ever imagined. So, if you find yourself standing at a crossroad, torn between holding on and letting go, remember this: sometimes holding on hurts more than releasing ever will. When you let go, you don't lose, you align. You align with faith, with healing, with freedom. Before a woman's life changes forever, she will always pass through this sacred fire of letting go. It burns, yes, but it burns away the unnecessary. And when the smoke clears, she stands radiant, peaceful, and unshakable, because she now understands not everything meant to stay, not everyone meant to understand, not every chapter meant to continue. And that's perfectly okay. There comes a time in every woman's life when the very pain that once broke her becomes the light that guides her. What she once thought would destroy her begins to shape her into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. This is the moment of awakening, when she stops running from her struggles and begins to walk through them with quiet courage. This is what we call the shift of inner fire. At first, this fire doesn't feel like strength. It feels like heartbreak, disappointment, loneliness. It feels like loss. It's that moment when everything she believed in seems to collapse, when the people she trusted walk away, or when her plans fall apart despite her best efforts. But even in that darkness, there's a spark that refuses to die. You see, a fire always begins with friction, and so does transformation. In those silent nights of tears, she starts talking to herself differently. Instead of saying, "Why me?" she starts whispering, "Maybe this is teaching me something." And that's when her pain starts turning into power. Let's imagine a simple, relatable scene. A woman gives her all to her career, long hours, sleepless nights, pure dedication. Yet one day, she's replaced or overlooked. The pain is sharp, the ego feels crushed. For days she feels lost. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice says, "You are more than a job title." That voice grows stronger each day. Slowly, she starts working on something new, something that aligns with her soul. Months later, she's leading her own project, doing work that lights her up. She looks back and realizes what she thought was rejection was actually redirection. That is how the inner fire works. It burns away illusions to reveal truth. When a woman begins to feel this shift, her entire energy changes. She no longer seeks external validation. She begins to rely on her own strength. She understands that not everyone will stand beside her, and that's okay, because the ones who leave make space for her own power to rise. Her confidence doesn't come from applause anymore. It comes from survival, from knowing she went through storms and still kept her heart gentle. Have you ever noticed how gold is purified? It is placed in fire. The heat removes impurities, leaving behind only brilliance. The same happens to a woman's soul. Life's trials are not punishments, they are refinements. They remove what doesn't belong until all that remains is her essence, her truth, her courage. Sometimes the universe allows challenges not to break her, but to introduce her to her inner strength, the kind she didn't even know existed. I once met a woman who had faced unimaginable loss. Her marriage had ended, her finances were unstable, and her health was suffering. She told me, I felt like everything was being taken from me. But then, one morning, while sitting alone, she had a realization. Maybe I'm being emptied so that I can be filled with something new. That thought became her turning point. She began to rebuild her life piece by piece, not from anger, but from purpose. Years later, she said something beautiful. The fire that once burned my world also gave me light to find my way. That is the miracle of this shift. When a woman stops asking for life to be easy and starts praying for the strength to grow, her pain transforms into her teacher. Her tears become sacred because every tear waters the soil of her new beginning. In this stage, her attitude toward life changes completely. She doesn't fear endings anymore because she's seen how every ending hides a new beginning inside it. She stops saying, I can't do this, and starts saying, let me see what I'm capable of. She no longer runs from the fire, she walks into it with faith. The inner fire gives her something precious, resilience. She learns that true strength is not about never falling, it's about rising every time she does. Let's look at another simple example from daily life. A mother who's raising her children alone. There are nights when she feels exhausted, invisible, and overwhelmed. Yet every morning, she wakes up, prepares breakfast, and smiles for her kids. That is the fire of love, silent, steady, unstoppable. She might not see it, but every act of endurance is proof of her spiritual strength. That's how this shift looks. Not dramatic, not loud, but powerful in its simplicity. When this inner fire awakens, a woman starts walking differently. Her steps carry quiet confidence. Her eyes reflect experience. Her words carry weight. Because they come from someone who's lived through storms. She becomes the kind of woman who doesn't need to prove her strength. Her peace speaks for her. And here's the most beautiful part. Once she finds her fire, she begins to light others. She becomes the friend who listens without judgment, the mother who teaches strength through love, the leader who inspires through humility. She knows pain intimately, so she carries compassion naturally. Fire, you see, it doesn't only destroy, it also illuminates. It clears old paths so that new seeds can grow. So when life feels like it's burning everything down, don't lose faith. You are not being punished, you are being prepared. You are not being destroyed, you are being defined. Every heartbreak, every failure, every closed door, it's adding fuel to your inner flame. And when the time is right, you will rise, not in anger, but in grace. You will walk forward with a soft heart and a strong mind, glowing with quiet power. Because that's what true transformation looks like. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you always were, beneath the doubts, beneath the fear, beneath the pain. The shift of inner fire teaches a woman that she doesn't need to wait for someone to save her. She is the flame that can light her own path. And when she realizes that no darkness can ever scare her again, no failure can ever define her again, because she's not afraid of the fire anymore. She is the fire. There comes a time in a woman's journey when she stops seeking answers from the world and starts listening to the quiet voice within her heart. It's not a loud voice, not something you can hear with your ears. It's a whisper, soft but certain, that says, "This is right for you," or "This isn't your path." That voice is called intuition. And when a woman's life is about to change forever, that voice becomes her greatest guide. At first, this shift feels strange. The world has taught her to listen to everyone else, to parents, to friends, to society, to logic. She's been told to think carefully, to analyze, to be realistic. But intuition doesn't speak the language of logic. It speaks the language of the soul. It doesn't shout. It nudges. It doesn't argue. It knows. This is the stage where she begins to trust her inner, knowing more than external opinions. She starts to feel when something is off, even when everything looks fine. She can sense people's intentions, even when their words sound sweet. She starts to notice signs from life, coincidences, dreams, numbers, songs, little reminders that she is not alone. Imagine this: a woman is offered a great job opportunity in another city. Everything about it looks perfect on paper: a higher salary, a bigger office, respect. Everyone around her says, "You'd be crazy not to take it." But something inside her doesn't feel right. She can't explain it logically, but there's a quiet discomfort in her heart. Days later, she discovers that the company is unstable. Layoffs are coming. That's when she realizes her intuition was trying to protect her. This is what happens when intuition awakens. She starts to sense life before it happens. She no longer needs to see the whole staircase. She just trusts the next step. You see, intuition is the divine compass placed within every woman. It's her built-in connection to wisdom beyond logic. And when she learns to listen, she never loses her way. When this shift begins, she becomes more aware of energy than words. She can walk into a room and feel if something is peaceful or tense. She meets a person and instantly knows whether that energy uplifts her or drains her. Earlier, she used to ignore those feelings, thinking, maybe I'm overreacting, but now she honors them. She realizes that inner sense is never wrong. Let me share a small story. A woman once said, "Every time I ignored my gut feeling, I regretted it. But every time I followed it, even when it scared me, it led me somewhere better." One day, she felt an urge to take a different route to work. It made no sense. The usual route was faster, but she followed that small voice. Later, she learned there had been an accident on her normal path. At the exact same time, she smiled through tears and whispered, "Thank you." That's what intuition does. It protects, guides, and directs, not with logic but with love. During this shift, she starts to spend more time in stillness, meditation, nature walks, journaling, even silent prayer, because she realizes her intuition speaks loudest when her mind is quiet. The more she disconnects from noise, the more clearly she hears her soul. There's something truly powerful about a woman who trusts her intuition. She becomes centered, grounded, and calm. She doesn't chase answers. She attracts them. She doesn't rush decisions. She allows divine timing to unfold. She stops forcing doors to open and starts trusting that what's meant for her will never miss her. In relationships too, her intuition becomes her protection. If someone's energy feels wrong, she doesn't need proof. She honors that feeling. Earlier, she might have ignored the red flags, hoping things would change. Now she listens to her heart, not her hopes. She realizes that intuition is love's wiser form. It knows when to hold on and when to walk away. When she lives through her intuition, her confidence blooms. She no longer asks, "What should I do?" She simply knows. And that knowing comes with peace. You'll notice how her life becomes more aligned. Opportunities begin to appear exactly when she's ready. The right people enter at the right time. Even her challenges seem meaningful. That's because intuition connects her directly to divine timing. She stops pushing and starts flowing. Have you ever seen a bird migrating thousands of miles without a map, yet always finding its way home? That's intuition. The bird doesn't have logic, it has inner direction. A woman too has that same natural wisdom. But she must quiet the noise of the world to hear the whispers of her heart. One evening, she might be sitting quietly, maybe sipping tea, watching the sunset, and suddenly she feels something inside her say, "It's time. Time to start that business. Time to forgive. Time to move on. Time to love again." She doesn't know where the courage comes from, but she follows it. And when she does, everything starts to align beautifully. That's the magic of the intuitive shift. It reconnects her to her divine essence. When people see her now, they might call her lucky. They say, everything seems to fall into place for her. But what they don't see is the silent work, the inner surrender, the listening, the trusting. She's not lucky, she's aligned. And that alignment comes from faith. The faith that even if she can't see the full road ahead, she can trust the light within her to guide the next step. So if you too have been feeling something deep inside, a pull toward change, a soft nudge, a quiet whisper, don't ignore it. That's your intuition speaking. Maybe it's telling you to take that leap of faith, to forgive yourself, to let go of fear, to start something new, or to simply rest. Remember, logic belongs to the mind, but intuition belongs to the soul. And the soul always knows the way home. When a woman begins to trust that inner knowing, she becomes unstoppable, not because she controls life, but because she flows with it. She doesn't fight storms anymore. She dances in the rain, knowing every drop is taking her where she's meant to be. That's when you can see her smile, peaceful, calm, and radiant. Because now she walks not with fear, but with faith. And faith, my friends, is the language of intuition. There comes a sacred moment in every woman's life when she stops looking for love in the eyes of others and finally turns that gaze inward. It doesn't happen suddenly. It happens after years of giving, caring, fixing, and pouring herself into people who sometimes never saw her worth. And then, one quiet day, her soul whispers, "What about me?" That whisper marks the birth of a new chapter, the shift of self-love. For so long, she was taught that loving herself was selfish. She believed she had to put everyone else first, children, family, work, friends, and that her needs could wait. But one day she realizes, if I keep giving without filling my own cup, I will run dry. This realization doesn't come from pride, it comes from exhaustion. She begins to understand that self-love is not vanity, it's sanity. Imagine this. A woman spends her whole day taking care of others, cooking, cleaning, working, worrying. At night, she sits for a few minutes in silence and feels invisible. Not because people don't value her, but because she has forgotten to value herself. The next day, she decides to do something small. Maybe she makes herself a cup of tea before everyone else wakes up, and she just sits quietly enjoying it. That little act is not selfish, it's sacred. It's her way of saying, I matter too. Self-love begins in moments like that, gentle, ordinary, yet powerful. When this shift begins, a woman starts to look at herself differently. She no longer sees only her mistakes or flaws. She starts seeing her strength, her endurance, her grace. She looks in the mirror and, instead of criticizing her reflection, she softly smiles and says, You've been through so much, and you're still here. That single sentence becomes healing. She starts saying, no, not to reject others, but to protect her peace. She stops explaining her boundaries and starts honoring them quietly. She realizes that saying no to chaos is saying yes to calmness. In daily life, you can see this shift in small decisions. She eats a little healthier, not because of society's standards, but because she wants to feel better. She goes for a walk, listens to music, reads a book, or simply spends time doing nothing, guilt-free. She understands that rest is not laziness, it's love in action. I once met a woman who told me, I used to wait for people to appreciate me, for someone to say I'm beautiful, kind, or enough. But the day I stopped waiting and said those words to myself, everything changed. Her glow didn't come from makeup or approval, it came from peace. That's what self-love looks like, a quiet glow that no one can take away. When this shift deepens, her relationships begin to change too. She no longer begs for love, she attracts it naturally. Because when you love yourself, you teach others how to love you. She no longer accepts half-hearted efforts or one-sided connections. She doesn't need to chase anyone. She simply chooses what feels right for her soul. There's a beautiful strength in a woman who knows her worth. She doesn't compete or compare anymore. She claps for others without doubting her own light. She understands that everyone has their own timing, their own purpose, their own season. One of the most powerful signs of self-love is forgiveness, especially forgiving herself. For years, she carried guilt for mistakes, for not knowing better, for giving too much, for staying too long. But now she whispers to her heart, I did the best I could with what I knew. And with that forgiveness, the heavy weight on her shoulders melts away. In this phase, she begins to enjoy her own company. What once felt like loneliness now feels like peace. She might light a candle, put on soft music, and spend time journaling or dreaming. She begins to discover parts of herself she had forgotten. Her creativity, her laughter, her curiosity. She realizes she doesn't need anyone's permission to be happy. Self-love also teaches her balance. It's not about ignoring others or living in ego. It's about remembering that she too is human, that her emotions deserve space, that her body deserves rest, that her dreams deserve pursuit. Think of it like this. When you're on an airplane, they tell you to put on your own oxygen mask first, before helping others. Why? Because you can't help anyone if you can't breathe. Self-love is that oxygen mask. It helps her breathe again, live again, and give again, but this time from fullness, not from emptiness. When she truly embraces this shift, her entire energy transforms. Her smile becomes softer, her words kinder, her presence more peaceful. She no longer seeks validation because she carries approval within her. She doesn't rush to prove her worth. She lives it. She becomes like a blooming flower, open, radiant, complete in herself. And just like bees naturally come to a flower, the right people and opportunities begin to come to her. I remember once a woman told me, earlier, I used to wait for someone to bring me flowers. Now I buy them for myself. That's not arrogance. That's self-respect. It's understanding that love begins within. And this love, once found, changes everything. It heals old wounds. It softens the voice of doubt. It fills the heart with quiet joy. So, if you ever find yourself tired of being everything for everyone, pause. Sit with yourself. Listen to your breath. Ask, what do I need today? Maybe it's rest, maybe it's forgiveness, maybe it's courage. Whatever it is, give it to yourself without guilt. Because the truth is, you cannot pour from an empty cup. The more you love yourself, the more you have to give to others, and that love becomes purer, freer, and brighter. When a woman finally embraces self-love, she becomes unstoppable, not because she's perfect, but because she's peaceful. Not because life is easy, but because she now walks with grace. She no longer seeks love, she is love.